Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on NoMoreSea.com's website as well as the online classes. This episode is a testament. Welcome back to the No More Sea broadcast, where today's topic is what is a testament? And we're not going to be able to do this topic justice in a sense because there's quite a bit here to dig into, and we don't want to go too deeply into this. This is just a general survey to help understand what a testament is. And so when we're talking about what is the Bible, we have the Old Testament and the New Testament per se. What is a testament in that regard is the context here. And simply, when you look up the original Hebrew form, one of the earliest terms that we come across here is barith, an agreement, a covenant or contract. And covenant is most important. And I would urge you to look into Kenneth Kitchen. It's quite expensive, and I'd love to get a copy of it, but I'm told it's the definitive study because of the great depth it goes into on this subject of covenant to best understand what it is. So it's a covenant or contract and agreement. And even, I think, interestingly enough, David Instone Brewer over at Tyndale House there near Cambridge has done some work to express a difference of terminologies when we're dealing with a covenant or contract and how it's understood in the UK even today and how it's understood in the U.S. because they're quite different. And we want to understand this term best, not by necessarily what we've attached to these words over time. We have the last will and testament in a sense. So we have that terminology that kind of still resonates a little bit, but that word testament is not used very often. And so we have to go back to the original language and begin to understand what some of these things are and how to deal with them. And so, again, when we're looking it up, covenant, doing a word study in Logos, we have these Hebrew terms and their various threads of meaning, but the main understanding is that word covenant. That's the main one, but there are a few other instances where we have a slightly different understanding based on some other Hebrew words too that kind of go into that word when we're using English word covenant, and doing a Bible word study on the English word, which is not the best way to go, but just to get an understanding. The main word is this. We have in Genesis chapter 6, verse 18, where it is said, "But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." Interestingly, God is establishing his covenant. And turning to the Greek then, if we use the Greek Septuagint here, we can see the Greek term for the word covenant. And we can begin to understand that. And then that way we can compare how the New Testament writers use this term that is used in the Old Greek and compare what they're doing in diatheke. Jesus, in Luke 22:20, has, and likewise the cup after they had eaten. This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. New covenant. And so at the Eucharist, at the Lord's Supper, when Jesus institutes this, he's instituting the new covenant before he's going to go to the cross. And there's tie-ins in the Greek then to what's going on in Exodus 24, verses 48, where again Moses writes down all the words of the Lord. He's writing it down. He rose early in the morning, built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. So again, the pillars represent the tribes. And he sent young men of the people who offered burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. So this is a whole fellowship offering. And Moses took half of the blood and put it on the bases, and half the blood he threw against the altar. And then he took the book of the covenant. There we go. And he read it in the hearing of the people and said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, we will be obedient." So what Moses has written down, they agree to that. So we're connecting this idea of covenant to book. Remember, Bible book. We're tying these two together. And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." So this act, and this is very rich and very, very, very deep. But this act in Exodus 24 is extremely important. What's happening here? So you have in the beginning what God does at the very beginning, what he does with creation. And then we have all these rebellions and things that we keep talking about in this channel, and how this pattern keeps, this rhythm keeps echoing throughout. As we continue the narrative story, we have this, again, just like a song, we have a verse, chorus, verse, chorus. We have this repetition of ideas where God is doing something with humanity, and humanity responds, then rebels, and needs to repent and be restored to respond again. And it keeps happening over and over and over again. And here in Exodus 24, we have Moses in sacred space on the sacred mountain, and he's having a meeting, and he's got the people represented there by the stones. And he sprinkles the blood upon them, and he establishes the blood of the covenant, and they are choosing to tie these words, and for those words that God spoke, they are going to choose to embody and become living examples of those very words. Now again, we could highlight, there's a lot going on here in chapter 24, and I just want you to understand how much the New Testament writers in Luke, what Luke is trying to do in capturing what's going on in Luke 24, and how he's trying to bring all of this over. And so we could spend a long time on Exodus 24 and all the things that are happening. And that's what Luke is packaging when Jesus says those words, what all he is grabbing. It's amazing the amount of information, knowledge, and background that it takes for one to understand what is happening. And as God created this new people in the book of Exodus and new nation from nothing through Moses, and brought them to that place, and what he was doing, and then what Jesus is going to do by choosing to use these loaded theological terms. And I want you to make these connections in seeing that. And so as we go to the Old Greek, you can see we have, again, book and covenant, this attachment. And again, it's our friend Biblion. It's this idea of attaching these two things together. There's a lot that Jesus is packing in. And of course, when you go to lots of theological studies, they're going to go to Jeremiah 31:31, where it's prophesied, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, which was fascinating because God had divorced Israel. How is he to remarry? And that's all fascinating. And those studies are, again, worthy of your looking into. So there's so much packed in behind each one of these terms that requires much rich and deeper theological study of what's going on. So maybe when we have these words about new, and this is where the name for the New Testament comes from, what Jesus establishes when he comes in his incarnation, and what he speaks of before his death. And so fulfilling this prophecy in Jeremiah 31, and then that is what guides later believers then to attribute this term to the collection that we have of 27 books that represent the new way to go forward. And again, that's all packaged in the first century when whatever was happening didn't work. So they had a temple, the first temple, they lost it. They got a second temple, and that's being remodeled by Herod, but it gets destroyed in AD 70. So if you go back to some of our lessons on this channel in history surrounding this term of Second Temple period, what it means to be a second temple. And so you have no temple. And so in the first century, you have two responses that come out of what happens in the first century. In the first century, you have the Christ event, and you have the destruction of the temple. And Christians understand those two things, and different Christians understand differently, but a proper or an appropriate analysis of the data, it's intriguing what you can pull from that. And then you have rabbinical Judaism that comes out of it, and they go into all their traditions. And so you have two children born, almost a sense, two sons of the faith, and two ways of proceeding forward until you get like this third thing called Islam that comes later in the 6th or 7th century. So it begins to make itself known by then and comes prominent. But this is where your idea of, again, testament comes from. And this term is loaded and there's a plethora of scholarship on it, and there's so much going on here underneath each of these terms and each of these slides, in this presentation, that it's just hard to move on and keep this a simple survey. Now, Augustine of Hippo has said that this grace hid itself under a veil in the Old Testament. He's the one that used this term, and that's why we call it the Old Testament. But it has been revealed in the New Testament according to the most perfectly ordered dispensation of the ages, for as much as God knew how to dispose all things. And so we have this idea of what was hidden in the Old Testament has been unveiled or unhidden or revealed. So, there's different people have taken what Augustine said different ways, but you have this idea of a lot of things that were laid out and kind of teased in the Old Testament that come to fruition in the New Testament, and we've got to decide how we're going to live as God's people in our current understanding of things. Here's a diagram that I've taken from Norman Geisler in his general introduction to the Bible. And you have in the Old Testament, Christ is in shadow, but in the New Testament, in substance, in pictures, in person, in type, in truth, in ritual, in reality. Latent, patent, prophesied. He's present, implicitly revealed and explicitly revealed. So this is pretty much what we have going on here. And so the different people have taken what Augustine said and have developed in different ways. And this is an understanding one can have. And so this is what we mean by the word testament. And this is just a very shallow, and you can see I'm straining to not say more because there's so much more to be said and worth your studies on your own to discover.
Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes and videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.